Hi, my name's Nick Francis. I'm the Chief Technology and Marketing Officer for Brooklyn Vendor Assurance, and I'm also a board advisor for the Vendor Ops community. I want to spend a few minutes talking to you today about how your supplier management strategy can help drive your corporate strategy in terms of engaging your suppliers and keeping them on message and the benefits of doing that.
Vendor Ops, leveling up your vendor management.
Starting with this, we've got a view of, I suppose, the strategic construct of an organisation. And what I mean by that is ultimately the wants and needs of a company is driven by the shareholders and to some degree the customers and the market trends. And those feedback loops, considering all three of those things with a little bit of a political and economic and social wound into that, would drive what your external influences are to your company strategy. What your shareholders need from the business, from the short, medium term, what your customers expect of you and what you've committed to customers that you'll do so you can retain them and hopefully upsell them. And the market trends, what new technology and new innovation is coming out in the space in which you operate that can help you to help your customers further and make your product or service then that bit more sticky and a bit more relied on by your customer base. That then mixed in with, like I said, political, economic, social, technological, legal or environmental challenges, you consider what you need to do from a company strategy. That company strategy is also influenced by two other things. The public-facing persona of your company and your organisation. So what your brand looks like externally to just Joe Public, but also your customers, taking into consideration that your strategy does need to pay homage or be aware of your values as an organisation and your behaviours that are expected of you as a company and how you stand out in the marketplace for that. So you need to be considering that in part of your company strategy. And if your external influence from the shareholders, customers, market trends, etc. are changing that, then you need to pay some attention to how you would review and look at your public-facing persona from a missions, ethos, values and behaviours perspective. And then in an increasing amount of industries, definitely in financial services, historically, you've always got to watch how your company is impacted by the regulator. There's about 90 regulation or regulating bodies across the UK. They're across all different sectors. Many of them are industry aligned, and they often set out guidance, either how you need to operate internally from a quality control and resilience perspective, or they set out guidance that how you need to treat customers fairly and work with customers to make sure that the customer is always at the heart of everything you do. That also needs to be considered in any company strategy. What then commonly happens is then the external influencing factors come down to this bit in the middle around the internal influencing factors, so the boards and the executives that run the organisation day to day need to consider in their own right what that input from external looks like, going through the chief executive officer into, some organisations don't have this layer, but a lot of large banks do and large enterprises, a chief operating officer layer, and then how this breaks down into the individual departments. So the business units are required to interpret what at a strategic company level, so the missions, the ethos, the values, etc., and the direction that the board wants to go in as input from the shareholders, customers and market trends. Each business unit needs to work out what their skew on that is and their impact and their own internal strategy to meet the demands that are coming down to them. So obviously in the chief financial officer's sense, what that looks like from a financial perspective and the departmental goals that underpin that for that department. In the procurement sense, what are the departmental goals for that roll up to meet their side of the strategy? And then from a technology perspective, what's the needs on technology to underpin the company strategy? Then you've got this slightly siloed off part of the organisation that's become a more increasing role over the last sort of several years. It's more common in financial services and large enterprises, a chief risk officer role. And now feature in most enterprise organisations. They have significant influence, especially when they're looking from a 3 lines of defence model. They've got to provide oversight onto these parts of the organisation and then independently report up to the board, even sometimes, in most cases, bypassing the CEO, even though they'd have a dotted line to the CEO and report to the CEO, and also reporting up to the regulator where relevant to do so. And they've got to work out what their part of the strategy is from an oversight and risk perspective. Now, all these different departmental goals and all these different departments will have suppliers. So there's a requirement that the strategy that's written up here that then is distilled down into departmental strategies and departmental goals need to be communicated out through the supplier base, the supply chain, which is part of the supply management strategy. Right, so there's this wide bit around a supply management strategy that says, how do we collaborate and open up communication lines to talk to our suppliers and our vendors about possible process changes, people changes, increased or decreased governance, and the technologies we use and how that's changing. So there is a need to have this communication cascade and to get your supply chain and suppliers, your immediate third parties, aligned to what the company is doing. And it's much easier if you can do that in a structured, process-driven, repeatable and scalable way so that you can get your suppliers then coming back to you with how they could potentially help about that. If you never tell them about this or you never cascade that message, you cannot expect your suppliers to be able to help you with the challenges that are set forth within that strategy and thus your objectives. Old adage, a problem shared is a problem halved. Maybe sometimes a bit of a stretch for some topics, but it's definitely true for this. The more eyes you can get on your strategic direction and where you need to go from a strategy perspective, the more you can cascade that, your suppliers can add a huge amount of value to you on an ongoing basis. And the more and closer you can keep them from that, educating them on your strategy, the better chance you've got of delivering that strategy. Very brief, I know. I hope that was useful. Speak to you next time. Thank you.
To keep up with the latest Vendor Ops news, subscribe here and follow us on LinkedIn. Links in the description below.